It was just another busy evening at La Lumiere, the upscale restaurant in the heart of downtown. A place where high-end clientele dined, where the buzz of conversation blended with the clinking of wine glasses and the soft notes of a pianist playing in the background. The staff knew how to cater to every whim, every need. But there was something different about that evening. It was something that would go unnoticed by most, but would mark a turning point for me. For Sarah Williams, a waitress at the restaurant, and for someone I would soon come to know as Mia Carter. It was close to 7:30 p.m. when I first saw her. A young girl, maybe around 12 or 13, sitting alone at a table near the window. Her head was slightly tilted, her hands fumbling over the edges of her menu, but she never once looked up. Her eyes were closed, and her face had a faint, distant look that seemed to suggest she was deep in thought. But something in her demeanor made me pause. She wasn't looking at the menu because she couldn't. She was blind. The hostess, Karen, had seated her as if nothing was unusual, but the girl was alone. No guardian, no parent. I couldn't help but wonder why someone so young was sitting in a place like this all by herself. And it didn't help that the wait staff had all noticed her too, each one giving their own fleeting glance, but no one doing anything to approach her. I tried to keep my focus on the tables that I had to tend to, the orders that needed to be taken. But the girl, Clara, kept appearing in the corner of my vision. It became impossible to ignore. She had been sitting at that table for nearly 30 minutes now, untouched by the bustle of the restaurant around her. No one had taken her order. No one had offered to assist her. As I walked past her table, I noticed her hands trembling slightly as they reached out for the edge of the table. She had an empty glass in front of her, but no one had refilled it. I knew what I had to do. I had seen her a few times before, but I had never paid much attention to her situation. That night, though, something felt different. I couldn't just pass by. "Hi there," I said softly, leaning in slightly to catch her attention. She looked up at me, her gaze unfocused. "Oh, hello," she said, her voice hesitant but warm. "I think my mom is late." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. It was clear that she was waiting for someone, but there was no one else around. The realization hit me like a wave. She had been left alone. It wasn't just an innocent mix-up. Clara was blind, and she was all alone at a restaurant full of people. "I'm Sarah," I said. "Can I get you something to drink while you wait? Maybe some water or juice?" She nodded, her smile faint but thankful. "Water would be nice." As I moved to refill her glass, I noticed Karen, the hostess, watching me from across the room. Her eyes narrowed as she watched me interact with Clara. I knew she didn't approve. This wasn't the first time I'd gotten a look from her. She wasn't the friendliest person, but today I wasn't backing down. "I'll be right back with your water," I said gently, and went off to get a glass. I couldn't help but think about the situation. Why was she alone? Why had no one come to help her sooner? Was her family caught up with something? I had no answers, but I had the feeling that I wasn't the only one who was noticing the situation. As I returned with the water, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. A woman had entered the restaurant, her eyes scanning the room, and then she spotted Clara. The woman was tall, dressed in a sharp, dark suit, and her presence commanded attention. There was something about her that radiated power, but there was no kindness in her gaze as she walked toward Clara's table. "Clara!" the woman called out in a clipped voice, and I immediately recognized her as Mia Carter, the CEO of Bennett Technologies, a massive healthcare firm known for its influence in the tech world. She looked as if she was in a hurry, and her eyes held a sense of impatience. "Mia," Clara said, her voice sounding more confused than relieved. "Are you here?" Mia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked around the restaurant, her expression tight with frustration. She stood stiffly at the edge of Clara's table, clearly not expecting the circumstances. "Clara, I need to speak with you." "Come on," she said, her voice colder than the temperature of the room. She didn't bother to offer a hand or any assistance. I watched as Clara slowly stood up from the table, her steps uncertain. Mia's voice echoed in the restaurant as she instructed her daughter with such authority, completely ignoring the fact that Clara was blind and had been sitting alone for who knows how long. Something in me stirred. I wasn't sure why, but the way Mia was treating Clara, as if she were a burden, irked me. It was clear that Clara didn't deserve this cold treatment. Mia hadn't even looked at her with the same warmth I had shown. I walked over to the table where Mia stood, and as I approached, Mia turned her head, her sharp eyes catching mine. "What are you doing?" Mia asked, her tone clipped. "I was just checking on her," I said, standing my ground. "She's been waiting for quite a while, and I thought I could help her. I don't think anyone's acknowledged her for the last hour. Mia's eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned sharply on her heel and walked away, pulling Clara along with her. I stood there for a moment, my heart racing, anger rising within me. I knew Mia Carter had money, power, and influence, but none of that could excuse the way she was treating her daughter or the way she dismissed me in my act of kindness toward Clara. As Mia led Clara away, I couldn't help but wonder, what kind of mother abandons her blind daughter like this? What kind of world were we living in where a young girl simply waiting to be seen and heard could be treated like an afterthought? Little did I know that was only the beginning of an experience that would change everything. A few hours later, I would discover just how much Mia's actions, and my own, would come to shape not just Clara's life, but my own too. I would also learn that sometimes being kind isn't just about making things better in the moment. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. And that night, I knew I had made a choice, one that would haunt me and challenge everything I had known. It would force me to confront something bigger than myself, something I had never expected, but it was something I was now a part of. The change had already begun. I couldn't stop thinking about Clara, about Mia, about how they both interacted with each other, or rather, how Mia treated her daughter. I had worked at La Lumiere for several months now, but that evening felt different. It felt like I had seen something that most people overlooked, or maybe I was the only one who had noticed it. The next day after my shift ended, I went home and tried to shake the thoughts of what had happened the night before. But it didn't work. The image of Clara sitting alone at that table, the look in her eyes when she smiled up at me, stayed with me. What had Mia been thinking when she walked in? Why had she been so cold? I couldn't understand it. I had no choice but to go back to work. When I arrived, I noticed Karen, the hostess, talking to another server in hushed tones. As soon as I walked by, Karen looked at me briefly, then turned her attention back to her conversation. But the feeling in the air was different today, heavier, more strained. I felt like something was building, something I couldn't quite place. As my shift went on, I was distracted. My mind kept returning to the scene from last night. Finally, around mid-afternoon, I saw her again, Mia Carter. She wasn't in her usual power suit. Instead, she was wearing something more casual, but her presence still commanded attention. She walked into La Lumiere with a look of determination, her face tight with purpose. I froze. I knew she was here for Clara, but I had no idea that I would be the one who would have to face her. Mia approached the counter where Karen was working. I saw Karen stiffen when she noticed Mia standing there, her posture becoming more formal. I couldn't hear the words they exchanged, but the tension in the room was palpable. Mia glanced around and then caught sight of me. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She didn't even nod. Her gaze was steely, calculating. I didn't expect her to approach me, but she did. And when she spoke, her voice was colder than before. "Sarah, isn't it?" she asked, her tone neutral, almost dismissive. "Yes," I replied, standing a little straighter, unsure of what was happening. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Now." My heart raced. What could she possibly want to discuss? Was it because of last night? I had no idea. Mia led me toward a quiet corner of the restaurant, away from the other patrons and staff. I had no idea what I was walking into. All I knew was that this conversation was going to change everything. When we reached the corner, she turned to face me. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. "I didn't appreciate how you handled things last night," Mia said bluntly, her tone serious. "That was my daughter, and you didn't need to interfere." I felt a jolt of confusion. "I wasn't interfering," I said, trying to explain. "I just wanted to help." Clara was alone. She tilted her head, narrowing her eyes slightly. "And who asked you to help? What made you think you had the right to?" The question hung in the air, and I was at a loss for words. I had acted on instinct. I had done what felt right, but Mia wasn't seeing it that way. "I was just being kind," I replied, my voice shaking slightly. I thought she needed someone to talk to. Mia's gaze softened for a split second, and I could see the faintest flicker of something. Regret, maybe. But it was gone just as quickly. "I know you were trying to help," she said, her voice lowering, "but you don't understand the situation. I'm the one who decides what Clara needs." The air between us grew heavier, and I realized something important. Mia wasn't just upset because I had helped her daughter. There was more to this story. She wasn't upset about the help. She was upset because I had seen something she wasn't ready for me to see. Before I could respond, Mia continued, her tone more somber. "Clara is a burden, Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's a reminder of everything I've done wrong, and I'll do anything to keep people from seeing her as weak." The words struck me like a blow. I couldn't process what Mia was saying. How could she think of her own daughter this way? How could she talk about her with so much coldness, so much distance? I don't understand, I said, my voice trembling. She's your daughter. She deserves to be loved, to be treated with respect. Mia stepped back slightly, as though I had struck her with my words. You don't get it, she said quietly. You don't understand the pressure, the responsibility, the weight of being a mother to someone like her. I wanted to argue, to tell her how wrong she was, but I didn't. I was too stunned. Mia looked at me for a moment longer, her expression unreadable, before she turned and left the corner, heading straight for the exit. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of confusion and anger boiling inside me. How could a mother feel this way about her child? I went back to my shift in a daze, my mind swirling with everything Mia had said. But one thing stuck out, one thing that Mia had mentioned that I couldn't shake: the burden. She saw her daughter as a burden, and I couldn't just let that go. That night after my shift, I decided to find out more. I didn't know what Mia was hiding, but I was determined to learn the truth. For Clara, for myself. And I wasn't about to let this story end with unanswered questions. The only thing I knew for sure was that something needed to change. And I was going to be part of that change. As I stood there, alone in the quiet of the restaurant, I made a vow to myself. I wouldn't let Clara be invisible anymore, no matter what it took. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The following days after that conversation with Mia were filled with uncertainty and restlessness. I couldn't get the look on her face out of my mind, nor could I forget the way she described her daughter, Clara. A burden. How could any mother see their own flesh and blood in that way? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Clara deserved so much more. She deserved to feel seen, loved, and accepted. Determined to learn more about Clara and uncover the truth about Mia's behavior, I began to keep an eye on the restaurant. Every time Clara came in, I watched her closely, not out of pity, but out of a deep sense of empathy and curiosity. What was her life really like? How did she feel about her mother? And why did Mia treat her the way she did? One day, while I was wiping down a table in the corner of the restaurant, I saw Clara and Mia walking toward the entrance. My heart skipped a beat. I could feel the tension in the air, even from a distance. Mia was walking several paces ahead of Clara, as usual. Clara was walking slowly, her cane tapping lightly against the floor with each step. It was clear she wasn't just physically blind, but emotionally distant from the woman who was supposed to protect and nurture her. I felt my chest tighten as I watched them. I was supposed to just be a server, a bystander, but this felt different. I couldn't just stand there and ignore it anymore. I needed to do something. I wasn't sure what, but I knew I couldn't keep watching Clara suffer. As they sat down at their usual table, Mia ordered with her usual coldness. But it wasn't just the way she spoke to the waiter that bothered me. It was the way she treated Clara. I could see the tension between them. Clara was trying to speak to her mother, but Mia barely acknowledged her. It was as if Clara didn't exist, at least not in any meaningful way. Once the meal arrived, Mia immediately buried her nose in her phone, ignoring Clara completely. But Clara was different. She had a sense of awareness about the world around her that was almost heartbreaking. She tried to engage with the meal, reaching for the glass of water, but her movements were tentative, careful. It struck me. Clara was trying, despite the isolation her mother forced upon her. I couldn't take it anymore. I approached their table cautiously, trying to hide my growing frustration. "Clara, would you like some help with that?" I asked softly. Her head turned in my direction, and she smiled faintly. Thank you. Yes, please. I don't want to spill anything." I helped her adjust her water glass and rearranged her utensils for her. I could tell she was trying to be independent, but the lack of support from her mother made it almost impossible. Mia finally glanced up from her phone and shot me an icy glare, but I didn't care. This was about Clara now. I wasn't going to back down. When the meal ended, I waited for them to leave. Clara stood up slowly, holding on to the arm of the chair, but she didn't make a move to leave with her mother. Instead, she lingered for a moment and then turned to me. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but full of gratitude. "I wish my mother would look at me the way you do." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. This was the heart of the problem. Clara wasn't just physically blind. She was emotionally neglected, abandoned by the very person who should have been her biggest supporter. I walked them to the door and made sure to say goodbye. But as I stood there watching them leave, I felt a burning sense of injustice rise within me. I had seen enough. I had heard enough, and I wasn't going to stand by while this continued. That night after my shift ended, I went home and started researching everything I could about Mia Carter. I needed to know who she really was, what motivated her, and why she treated Clara the way she did. What I found shocked me. Mia wasn't just an ambitious, self-made billionaire. She was a woman who had built her empire on control and manipulation. There were countless articles, interviews, and testimonials that painted her as a ruthless businesswoman who prioritized success over everything else. But what hit me the hardest was the revelation that she had been hiding Clara's true potential. Mia had blocked Clara from receiving the help she needed. Clara was not only emotionally and physically neglected, she had also been systematically denied opportunities for a better life. Mia's controlling nature, her need for perfection and power, had been her greatest weakness. And now it was time for me to do something about it. The next day, I returned to work with a sense of purpose. I wasn't going to sit idly by anymore. I wasn't just serving food at a restaurant. I was witnessing the unraveling of a family, and I had to step in. But I knew I had to be careful. Mia was a powerful woman, and I needed to approach this delicately. I couldn't just confront her head-on without understanding the full scope of her actions. So I kept my distance for now, but I was determined to find a way to help Clara. As I watched Clara walk into the restaurant the next day, I noticed something different in her demeanor. There was a small spark in her eyes, a glimmer of hope. Maybe she knew something I didn't, or maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe there was someone out there who cared. But I wasn't ready to give up on her, not yet. It was time to take action, and the first step was to confront Mia. And this time, I wasn't just a server. I was someone who was going to stand up for what was right. No one deserved to be treated the way Clara had been treated. The journey had just begun, and I was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty and anticipation. I could feel the weight of the decision that loomed ahead, the confrontation with Mia. Every time I saw her at the restaurant, the tension between us grew stronger. She had no idea what I knew about her, what I had uncovered. But I was ready to face her, ready to make her see the damage she was doing. One afternoon, as I arrived at work, I spotted Mia sitting alone at a table, tapping away on her phone as usual. Clara wasn't with her, and I felt a pang of sadness. I had hoped that one day Clara might come in without her mother, free to live her life without the oppressive presence that Mia cast over her. But today, Mia was here alone, and this was my chance. I approached the table cautiously, trying to maintain my composure. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the adrenaline rushing through me as I prepared to finally confront her. As I neared her, she looked up from her phone, her gaze cold and calculating. "What do you want?" Mia asked, her voice sharp. "Shouldn't you be working?" I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage I had. "I want to talk to you about Clara," I said, my voice steady but firm. "And the way you treat her." Her eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something. Anger. Guilt. It was hard to tell, but she didn't say anything immediately. Instead, she folded her arms, her expression hardening. "What about it?" she asked, her tone dismissive. "I'm her mother. I know what's best for her." I wasn't going to let her off that easily. "You don't know what's best for her, Mia," I replied. "You're holding her back. You've been treating her like she doesn't matter, like she's invisible. And I can't stand by and watch that happen anymore." The words came out more forcefully than I intended, but the anger and frustration I had been holding in for so long were finally spilling out. I was done being silent. Mia's face flushed with irritation. "You have no right to talk to me like that," she snapped. "You're just a server. You don't know anything about my life or my family." "Maybe I don't know everything," I said, my voice unwavering. "But I know enough. I know that Clara deserves so much more than the way you treat her. She's not your possession, Mia. She's a person, and you're breaking her." Her eyes flickered with something, regret perhaps, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. She leaned back in her chair and let out a humorless laugh. "You think you know everything, don't you? You don't know the first thing about being responsible for someone. You don't know what it's like to sacrifice everything for someone you love." I felt my stomach tighten as she spoke, but I didn't back down. "You're not sacrificing for her, Mia. You're controlling her. You're suffocating her, and I'm not going to let you keep doing it." Mia's expression hardened once more, and she stood up abruptly. "This conversation is over," she said coldly. "Don't ever talk to me like that again." But I didn't let her walk away. "I'm not done yet," I said, my voice firm. "You're going to listen, whether you like it or not." Mia paused, her back stiffening as she turned to face me. I could see the walls going up around her, the defensiveness kicking in, but I wasn't going to stop. "You can't keep pushing Clara away, Mia. She's your daughter. She deserves love, support, and a chance to be herself. You need to change. For a moment, there was silence between us. I could see her face soften ever so slightly, but she quickly masked it with anger. "You don't know me," she said through gritted teeth. "You don't know what I've been through, what I've had to do to get here." "I don't need to know everything," I said quietly. "All I know is that you're destroying your relationship with Clara. And if you don't change, you're going to lose her." For a brief moment, Mia looked at me as though she were seeing me for the first time, as though something inside her had cracked open. Then, just as quickly, she turned away, retreating into her usual coldness. "I don't have time for this," she muttered, walking briskly out of the restaurant. I stood there watching her leave, feeling a mix of frustration and exhaustion. Had I reached her, or had I just made things worse? The following days were tense, filled with moments of uncertainty. Mia didn't come back to the restaurant for a while, and Clara continued to come in alone. I couldn't help but wonder what had happened during the confrontation. Had I gotten through to Mia? Was she capable of changing? Then one afternoon, Clara walked into the restaurant with a quiet smile on her face. She looked different somehow, lighter, more at ease. She came up to the counter and smiled at me. "Thank you," she said softly, "for what you said to my mother." I was taken aback. "You heard us?" Clara nodded. "I overheard, and I think you're right. She's been so focused on controlling everything that she doesn't even see me anymore." "Clara, I started, but she cut me off. "I'm going to try to make her see," Clara said with quiet resolve. "I'm going to try to make her understand that I'm my own person." My heart swelled with pride for Clara. Despite everything her mother had done to her, despite the years of neglect and control, she was still strong enough to fight for herself. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope for both of them. Mia might have tried to break Clara, but Clara wasn't broken, not by a long shot. And no matter what happened next, I was going to be there for her, every step of the way. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The garage had been in operation for years, and Tom, the manager, was a seasoned veteran. He knew the ins and outs of the business better than anyone, or so he thought. Tom had been working at Lee Auto Repairs for nearly a decade, climbing the ranks from an entry-level mechanic to a position of power as the manager of one of the busiest garages. It was a hard-earned title, and Tom prided himself on the control he had over the shop. When Jordan Lee inherited the business from his father, Tom initially thought little of it. David Lee had been a fair boss, tough but rewarding to his employees. Tom had seen enough changes over the years to know that things weren't always going to stay the same. But this change, it felt different. Jordan, the new CEO, was young, ambitious, and to Tom, a bit too eager to prove himself. He hadn't grown up in the business like David. Jordan wasn't part of the old school, and Tom could already tell that the younger CEO didn't fully understand what it took to run a garage. Jordan's arrival sparked tension. Tom, for the first time in years, started to feel like his position was under threat. The first signs of change came when Jordan started making minor adjustments. He pushed for more efficiency, demanded better customer service, and, worst of all to Tom, began introducing new systems to track employee performance. To Tom, these were unnecessary distractions. The garage had been running fine for years, without all this corporate red tape. Jordan's desire to introduce order and structure felt like a personal affront. After all, Tom had been running things his way for years, and things were moving just fine, at least for him. The company was profitable, customers were coming in, and he made sure to turn a blind eye to any issues. Tom had learned how to navigate the system over the years, and with that knowledge came the ability to exploit it. While Jordan might have been focused on operational efficiency, Tom had found his own way of ensuring that the money kept rolling in. He knew the suppliers, the contractors, and the workers who could cut corners, and he had worked out deals that allowed him to pocket a little extra on the side. But it wasn't just about the side deals. Tom had also begun skimming from the company's profits. Supplies were being overordered, and parts that were never used were being sold off. He had a network of people who took advantage of the garage's outdated tools and resources, and it had been working perfectly for years. Tom had created his own little system where everyone turned a blind eye, including the workers who trusted him. Tom didn't see the harm. After all, the company was making money, the employees were working hard, and no one was the wiser. Sure, some complaints started rolling in: long wait times, customers upset about bad repairs, and mechanics overworked with outdated tools. But to Tom, these were just minor inconveniences. People would always complain, and it was part of the job. In his mind, no one would actually leave over a little inconvenience. The customers always came back. Jordan's growing focus on customer satisfaction and employee well-being made Tom uncomfortable. He didn't care about these ideals. They didn't help him line his pockets or maintain his position of control. Jordan was young and didn't understand the industry like he did. Tom had been in the trenches for years, and he knew the real way to get things done, or so he thought. Jordan's suggestions felt like interference, and soon Tom started feeling like his way of doing things was being challenged. The turning point came when Jordan decided to go undercover. After hearing the increasing complaints about poor service, long wait times, and unsafe working conditions, he couldn't ignore it any longer. He suspected something was wrong, but he didn't know exactly what. So to get to the heart of the problem, he disguised himself as a regular mechanic, using the name John, to see for himself. Tom, busy with his usual operations, didn't pay much attention when a new worker, wearing worn-out clothes and acting like just another mechanic, showed up at the garage. He assumed it was just another recruit hired by Jordan to fill in the gaps. Little did Tom know that this new employee was none other than the CEO himself, Jordan Lee, coming to discover the truth behind the complaints. At first, everything seemed fine. The usual chaotic buzz of the garage continued as mechanics scrambled to keep up with the flood of cars needing repairs. Lisa, a mechanic who had been struggling with broken tools and overworked schedules, greeted the new guy, John, and showed him around. Tom, overhearing their conversation, made no effort to step in and provide guidance. He wasn't interested in micromanaging anyone. The garage had always run on autopilot. However, as the day went on, John began to notice the cracks in the system. He saw the broken tools, the underappreciated staff, and the unsafe working conditions. The atmosphere was tense and unprofessional. Tom's rude attitude toward the workers and the lack of proper equipment were clear signs that things were falling apart. But Tom had learned how to survive in this environment. He had turned the other way when employees asked for better tools, claiming they had to make do with what they had. It wasn't his problem. But soon Jordan's frustrations grew. As the day wore on, he realized just how deep the issues ran. The tools were not only dangerous, but also outdated, and employees were working without the proper safety equipment. He witnessed Tom yelling at a mechanic for taking a water break, the mechanic visibly exhausted. Customers waited for hours without updates, and there was no system in place to ensure effective service. Jordan could see that Tom's way of doing business had gone from strategic to exploitative. It wasn't just the tools or the customers. It was the culture that Tom had built. Tom had created a toxic environment where employees were overworked, undervalued, and afraid to speak up. Jordan could see it in the mechanic's eyes. The workers had become robots, simply going through the motions without any pride in their work. By the end of the day, Jordan's frustration was palpable. He could feel the weight of the company on his shoulders, and he knew what needed to be done. This wasn't just about poor customer service anymore. It was about people's lives and livelihoods. He had to act quickly, and that meant making changes that would affect the future of Lee Auto Repairs forever. Jordan knew that the first step in fixing things would have to involve addressing Tom, but he wasn't ready to reveal his identity just yet. He had to see how deep the corruption went. Little did Tom know the real CEO had been standing right under his nose the entire time, quietly observing every mistake. The next day, Jordan returned to the garage, still operating under the guise of John. He knew he had to gather more information before making any decisions. As he watched the mechanics work, it became increasingly clear that the garage had been operating at a level far below what it should have been. The workers, though talented, were being held back by the poor working conditions, outdated equipment, and a lack of leadership from Tom. Jordan's observations only deepened his concerns. He watched as Lisa, one of the lead mechanics, struggled with an old, broken tool while working under the hood of a sedan. Her hands were covered in grease, her knuckles scraped raw. The ratchet wrench she was using was cracked, barely held together with duct tape. Jordan felt a knot in his stomach. It wasn't just bad for business, it was dangerous. The tools she was using were not only inefficient, but also unsafe, and Lisa seemed completely used to it. "Hey, can I help?" Jordan asked, offering to hold the light for her as she worked. She wiped sweat from her forehead and glanced up. "You're the new guy, right?" "I'm Lisa." "Sure, hold the light right there." As Jordan watched her work, he could see how exhausted she looked. She was pushing herself, trying to get through the day. But the tools and equipment she had to work with weren't just inadequate. They were downright hazardous. It made him furious, but he remained silent for now, wanting to learn as much as he could without blowing his cover. He gently asked, "These tools, they seem pretty worn out. Have you asked management for replacements?" Lisa let out a tired laugh. "Yeah, I've put in requests for months. I keep getting told the same thing. Make do with what you've got." but it's getting to the point where I don't feel safe using them. I'm not the only one either. A lot of us are working with broken equipment, but no one does anything about it. Jordan's frustration grew. He was shocked at the level of neglect in his own company. How could anyone let this happen? This wasn't just poor management. It was a blatant disregard for the safety and well-being of the employees. He felt a deep sense of guilt for letting it go unnoticed for so long. As the day went on, Jordan continued his undercover observations. He witnessed Tom, the manager, yell at a mechanic for asking to take a water break. The mechanic, a young guy named Tyler, looked exhausted and on the verge of collapse. Yet Tom didn't show any concern. "You're not here to take breaks," Tom barked. "Get back to work." Jordan could see how the workers were constantly on edge. They were terrified of Tom. The atmosphere in the garage was tense, as if no one dared speak up about their grievances for fear of being reprimanded or fired. The employees were afraid to voice their concerns, knowing that Tom had the power to shut them down.